15 nuclear waste sites, down from 107 at the end of the Cold War, remain under the control of the Department of Energy's Office of Environmental Management. A new report from GAO suggests that there are billions of dollars to be saved from optimizing the disposal plan for this waste. Here with more details is the Director for Natural Resources and Environment at the GAO, Nathan Anderson. Mr. Anderson, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Let's begin by setting the stage for this, because I imagine that unless they live next door to one of these sites, most Americans have no idea that this program even exists. So tell me a little bit about the Office of Environmental Management inside the Department of Energy and what it's responsible for.
Happy to, and I'll share a couple different descriptors that can help paint a picture. When the Cold War started, we entered into a decades-long enterprise of weapons production. When the Cold War ended, we had to clean up the mess from atomic weapons production. Department of Energy's Office of Environmental Management is tasked with cleaning up the legacy of the Cold War and the early Manhattan Project era. And what that means is there has been quite a bit of work over the 35 or so years since the office's inception. There were originally 107 sites. The office has cleaned up 92 of those, so 15 remain. However, it's those 15 that remain are the largest, the most difficult, the thorniest, if you will, of the department's responsibilities.
So when we talk about nuclear waste, there's a statistic in this report that is eye-popping, 11 million cubic meters of it. Just kind of like help give us a picture of what 11 million cubic meters of nuclear waste looks like.
Well, if you watch the Olympics and you've seen an Olympic-sized swimming pool, multiply that by about 4,500 times. If you've seen the Empire State Building, multiply that by 11. That's the volume that we're talking about.
Wow. All right. So it is mind-boggling. What do we do with it? Where does it go?
That's a phenomenal question, because the answer is it depends. And I was an economics major undergrad, so it depends is one of those answers that comes up quite a bit.
Close to my heart. Thank you.
and it's relevant here as well, because it requires us to break down the different types of waste that exist. Most of the waste that the Department of Energy is responsible for is considered low-level waste. It doesn't have all that much radioactivity. So when you're thinking about the 11 Empire State Buildings out there, 10 and change contain waste that doesn't have a whole lot of radioactivity, and so it can be treated as such. And for that kind of waste, there are a couple different sites. There are some commercial sites, one in Utah, one in Texas, and then there are some DOE sites, such as Nevada, where the waste can go with safely transported and safely stored for the future. But then there's a couple other types of waste that require more sophisticated, more technical, or technically rigorous approaches to disposal. One of those is called transuranic waste. We call it TRU, TRU, true waste, and that is generated from working with plutonium. The reason we need to do something different there is those are long-lived radionuclides, so it lasts a long time. That waste goes to New Mexico and is put underground, 2,000 feet in an old salt mine. Salt collapses over time, safely stores that waste for the long term, nowhere near any kind of potable water sources, et cetera. The tricky stuff is the high-level waste, that small fraction of the waste that exists that is in these tanks, like in Hanford and Idaho and Savannah River, that's sludge. This waste is hot. By that we mean very radioactive, and in many cases has long-lived radionuclides. That's what we need to figure out what to do, and that's where Yucca Mountain came into the equation. We don't have a Yucca Mountain. It's not looking like we're going to have a deep geologic repository for decades. That's probably the trickier, political conundrum.
That is such helpful background. And so now with that in our minds, 10 and 11 Empire State Buildings worth of nuclear waste, talk to me about this latest report that you've done, another look at this program and what it needs to do, what it doesn't need to do.
Happy to. So this report came about with the intent to paint a broad picture, to look at everything within the Department of Energy's areas of responsibility for nuclear waste disposal. All the different types of waste that are generated, all the different possible disposal sites. And it was done with taking into account the backdrop of the status quo exists because of agreements DOE has made with these individual sites at these states that didn't take into account the needs of other states. So we've got 15 sites remaining: Washington State, California, New Mexico, South Carolina. Agreements were made with state regulators, irrespective of some of the commitments that were being made in other states. And what that means is now DOE over time has learned it can't make all of its commitments. It can't meet all of the obligations under these variety of agreements. And so we looked at some of the constraints that keep DOE from being able to meet all of its agreements. And we did like an innovative methodology is how I will label it. We optimized. If you can imagine, you live on a cul-de-sac with 15 houses. Everybody's placing their individual orders through Amazon Prime or FedEx or UPS. Those companies have optimization analysis that would allow for one delivery at all 15 of those locations. DOE doesn't have that. DOE doesn't have the optimization analysis that can optimize logistics. So we did that using available data and found that billions of dollars can be saved by simply resequencing what waste is shipped from what site at what time to what location.
I'm speaking with Nathan Anderson. He's the Director of Natural Resources and Environment at GAO. So billions of dollars through resequencing. What would the steps need to be to actually make that happen?
That question gets right to our recommendations, because at the end of the day, the status quo does need to change for DOE to be able to not only meet its responsibilities, but to meet its responsibilities in such a way that is a responsible steward of taxpayer dollars. One, DOE needs to have the optimization analysis that backstops some of these decisions that could be better. Secondly, DOE needs to engage with the states. The states have these agreements in place that they entered into in good faith. DOE needs to create a forum where everybody can talk to each other, and DOE can help explain the different commitments that exist and how some of these regulatory agreements are going to need to change to allow for a more optimal sequencing of waste disposal. And if I can add one more thing to that, that discussion needs to be informed by what I would call an integrated disposal plan. Look at the low-level waste, the transuranic waste, the high-level waste that is within DOE's areas of responsibility, create an integrated plan that takes it all and identifies possible disposal pathways, and then open up a forum for renegotiating with the states when you have something that is more optimal to kind of leverage.
So, as you said up front, DOE has been working on these sites for decades now. The time frame to clear these up is years upon years upon years. That's a complicating factor, along with the fact that all 15 states that these remaining sites are involved in have separate agreements. Yep. Does DOE have the capacity to manage such a complex negotiation process, let alone the optimization planning?
I believe it does. I mean, at the end of the day, it requires, leadership commitment to recognize just how much can be saved here, without really doing anything different from a risk profile. And truly, at the end of the day, DOE has the ability to do something that is safer. You're getting this waste out of tanks in certain cases and immobilizing it, so it's less of a risk to the environment. You have the ability to do something faster, in that an integrated and optimized disposal schedule would get the waste to its disposal pathways faster and cheaper. I mean, there are tens of billions of dollars can be saved here. So when I say leadership commitment, what I mean is it needs to be prioritized within the realm of the Department of Energy to recognize just the substantial benefits that can be met. Once it's prioritized, then yes, the DOE does have the capacity to do this analysis and engage with the stakeholders.
Is the reduction in timeline the principal generator of those billions of dollars of savings? Just getting it all done faster?
It's part of it. Certainly part of it is minimizing hotel costs for certain types of waste. But there are other substantial savings that can be created by treating the waste in a risk-informed way. Waste that is by radioactivity low-level waste, but technically labeled high-level waste because of some waste is labeled as high-level waste because of its origin, not because of its risk. And so if Congress can get involved or DOE can exert its authority under one of its orders to classify the waste based on the risk it poses, it can then be treated with much less expensive treatment methodologies. In this case, grout versus glass. And that has the ability to save tens of billions of dollars as well and actually get waste to a final disposal location.
That's really helpful. How has DOE responded to your recommendations?
Well, in this case, DOE is going to respond later. What I mean by that is federal agencies that are the recipient of a GAO recommendation by law have 180 days to respond formally with what they are going to do to implement our recommendations. Our report just came out, a week ago. DOE is taking it, understandably, is going to take its time to determine precisely what they're going to do with our recommendations.
Well, we will look forward to their response and the follow-up because this is such an important consideration and affects so many locations and potentially has such a significant resource impact. Nathan Anderson, the Director of Natural Resources and Environment at GAO, thank you so much for your time this morning.
Thank you very much. I appreciate being here.
We'll post this interview along with a link to this report at federalnewsnetwork.com/Federal Drive. Subscribe to the Federal Drive wherever you get your podcasts.